Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you.
Welcome to the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast, episode 61. We've traveled through the Northerners' time tunnels and squandered the magical powers of the Founding Fathers cult to bring you another fantastic creator interview. I am Nick, and as usual, I'm joined by my better half, Snoggle, aka Becky. My dear, can you please introduce our VIP guest?
I absolutely can. It would be a pleasure. I can't believe it's this creator's second time on the show. We have been awaiting his return. He's one of Ghost Machine's co-founders, the co-creator and penciler of Redcoat, the man at least half responsible for the continued adventures of Simon Pure, though he's anything but, as we've come to know and love. Legendary storyteller Bryan Hitch. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome to have you back on the show, Bryan. And you are coming to us from the UK, is that right?
Yep, just outside London.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's wet and windy today. Yeah, we've had a nice long dry spell on the whole, dry and warm for most of spring, but it's just horrible at the moment. Though apparently it's got a nice day tomorrow, and it's mine and my wife's 20th wedding anniversary. So,
oh my gosh!
Congratulations!
Thank you. So we're going to have a little day off and go up into London and spend the day, and in fact, we're going back to the same hotel we spent our wedding night. We've been going there for 20 years.
Oh.
It's our little bolt hole, that place. So we're just going to go and have a chill for 24 hours, and no kids, no dogs, no stress.
That's amazing.
You're not going to be drawing any comic book pages in there, are you?
I am not, no. Well, though I have done on previous visits over the years. not this time. There's coffee, cocktails, and whatever else we feel like not doing.
So this is episode 61, which is wild. You were last on the show 46 weeks ago on episode 15. And
almost a year.
I know. What is the biggest difference between now and then for you?
There's lots of differences, really. I suppose a year ago we were just really getting started. I mean, I was having this conversation with Jeff yesterday, actually, because we always hate when there's a delay, and I was determined that it would just be us on this book and no fill-in issues. So we've tried to keep it as monthly as possible. And it's felt like it's been a little bit more delayed than we wanted it to be. But I was just realizing I've just finished issue 13, and issue 12 has just come out literally 13 months after issue 1. So that's not a huge delay in terms of the amount of issues published. But if you take out the 31 pages issue 13 became, issues 1 to 12 is still the equivalent of 14 issues of Marvel and DC books published in 13 months. So actually we haven't really been delayed, just done a lot of work. So the biggest difference, I suppose, now is the confidence that comes because we've kind of got the book rolling. We've overcome the inertia. We've started to get a much stronger idea of the voice of the title and the things we can do in the year of conversations. And we've worked so far ahead, plotted so far ahead, at least in general terms. And I've gone through that phase one always goes through. There's always a curve of having almost unlimited intentions towards making this the most extraordinary thing I've ever done. And then there's always the reality of a relatively monthly production, but also that it's still just a drawing each page. It's not what I can see in my head, which is all the reality of a $100 billion movie on every page. So you go through these cycles of getting used to the compromises you have to make in order to just do the work on a regular basis. Even if that's 6 issues a year or 12 issues a year or even 4 issues a year, it's still always a series of compromises. But you also gain perspective that you understand the world you're building better. You understand the character better. You kind of know where all the doors in the room are, and especially things like period costuming and whatnot become less something you have to constantly reference and research because you become more and more familiar with it. The latest I can now draw horses mostly without reference. So pretty much from any angle, because I've had to learn how to do that. The year perspective is in the first year, especially is in overcoming all of those different stages of inertia and adjustments. And now it feels like we're really ticking along, and you're in cruise control sounds a bit disparaging. I don't mean it like that. Just by that, I just mean you've overcome that hard work of acceleration, and now it's more of a maintenance level effort to just keep the balls rolling in the right direction with occasional guidance to move it. So perspective, I suppose, is the biggest thing. And that was a long way round of coming to a single word answer.
You can use all the long-winded answers you'd like.
So we'll get plenty of those, don't worry.
That's what we're here for. You mentioned something, finishing 13 and it being 31 pages. Was that the issue that you guys recently announced was going to have like a lot of extra pages as a result of the story being longer?
Yeah, I put that out there because I was aware that the book was suddenly delayed a couple of 3 weeks. And then when I got the script from Jeff, it was already, I think, about 24, 25 pages. And then by the time I was done with it, it had got up to 31 pages. And, that's an extra half an issue almost. So that adds to the amount of time, because then, especially when you're dealing with somebody like Brad Anderson's schedule, and Brad's coloring at least 4 of the titles every month, but that's an extra half an issue he's got to fit into this schedule. That's harder for him, harder for my inker Andrew. It is an interesting thing with the extra issues. I was saying earlier on that we've published quite a few extra pages. So I mean, all in all, we've in between issues 1 to 13 with the page count, it's the equivalent of 16 issues of Marvel or DC comics, monthly comics.
Wow.
So that's almost 3 extra issues of material. And even issue 1, which is 38 pages, was still $3.99. But in any given monthly print comic, you have 32 actual pages in Marvel and DC books. Most of the 12 of those pages are house ads and sold advertising space. And since while we do run house ads, we don't sell advertising space in the books. So that does give us 32 possible story pages each month. If we need a few extra pages, it doesn't cost anybody anything. So we would never put the price up just because we wanted to use what would have been 10 filler pages or back matter pages or advertising pages. So it's still $3.99 because it's still a 32 page book. It's just you're getting 10 pages of extra story.
That is unheard of in most industries of any kind, but in this industry, the big 2 would be calling that a giant size issue and be charging doubles. So that's pretty amazing, man.
Part of their business model, of course, is selling advertising space, because that helps offset some of the costs of producing the comic as well as, the print. So there's an understandable business model to it, but it wasn't part of our business model. So it's not something, at least for now, we have to worry about. Well, it just takes extra time, that's all, because, another 10 pages is another 2 weeks for me. It's another 2 weeks for Andrew. It's another headache for Brad.
So lucky number 13 is going to be a great issue.
I'm kind of pleased with it. I went through a real kind of swing on that a couple of times, thinking, this isn't working. I'm not doing this right. I should redraw everything. And then when I finished it, I read it back, and we're still doing kind of the dialogue polish on it now, but as the last ink's coming and Brad's coloring it, but I think I'm pretty happy with it overall. I think it hits the right beats anyway. And I think, because I'm not going to give anything away, but I think especially the way the issue ends, it's going to excite fans of the Unnamed universe.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, you said for you, perspective was the biggest change over the course of the last year. We would love your perspective on the last year of character changes and developments about Simon Pure. We've seen him go through trials and tribulations, massive losses, some of which have only been hinted at with like a panel with a date. Others we do know something happened. What is your favorite Redcoat moment thus far and why?
It's going to be a long list, and that changes issue to issue. And there's one in this issue, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there's one in this issue, 2 in this issue actually. One is an action beat, which is very cool. And the other is just another real nice emotional beat. I think what works for me with Simon is when we hit those swings where we're telling a story in a particular way or a scene in a particular way, and Simon is coming across as a real kind of, and then without being overt about it, the pendulum swings the other way, and you see that there's really a very well guarded, caring person in there. It's just he doesn't believe that about himself because he believes everything he was told growing up. We're going to unravel Simon's personality a lot more in future issues, and the 1909 storyline, which we start on issue 15, is a pretty heavy hitting storyline. I'm really looking forward to getting deep into that one. So I can't give you one, because from comedic ones like issue 1, Simon running down the street saying "lovely frock, madam." Issue 2, when Alfred says we're going to have to retreat, and Simon, you look in the distance, Simon's already heading over the fence in the graveyard. You know, there's comedic moments like that, but there's also the moments like just the look on his face when Albert dies at the end of issue 7. That's a character there where there's a lot of deep rooted emotional context. And when you get to play those swings, those are the moments that if we land them, I feel are good moments. I mean, it might be different for people reading. There might be cooler moments or more interesting moments or moments that resonate for them. But for me, what resonate are the emotional ones more than anything.
Well, I think the emotional ones add a layer to him that's needed, because he can't just be a mercenary who's sometimes a tool and then go on for 100 issues. He has to become something different and something more. And the way you've told the story, too, is that it's, in a lot of ways, it's a reflection of your own or Jeff's life experiences. So, you know, I think the emotional thing is key. Simon,
when we first meet him in issue 1, we jump that 120 odd years from him getting his immortality to the 1892 when he meets Albert. And there's a line of dialogue in there about, of course, I'm skipping over 120 years of misadventures, but we'll get to those later. When we meet Simon, he's deep in one of his whole swings. Mm-hmm. And Simon's life is very cyclical, not just because of his constant death and resurrections, but because every time he allows that, and you see this with people, and it's certainly true of me from time to time, but when you allow that emotion to come to the surface a little bit, sometimes the power of it is enough to make you want to push it back in and not deal with it, because to deal with the things that underlie those problems are going to be hard, they're going to be difficult, and it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of care, and a lot of attention. And so sometimes it's easier not to deal with the problems or the root of the problems you're having. And so you bury it. And that happens with Simon cyclically. We see, from time to time, he learned to care about Albert. So you know that is within him to care. He even cared about Benny for a few pages. And as we see, going back through those 120 years of skipped storylines, as we started, with issue 8, there are an awful lot of moments there that have allowed him to, deal with some of the trauma and the emotion he's had from seeing the girl's skeleton in the Bender's basement in issue 8, and that led him on a few pages of rampage to take out the Benders. That's an emotional reaction, but it's not just because of the girl. It seems with Simon, and we'll see why in the future, but it seems with Simon, especially when children are involved, and children are, mistreated, there's a part of Simon that responds to that in a very primal way, and there are reasons for that.
And we saw that in the relationship that is beginning with the young girl who's with the Northerner, it seems like, because he saves her in number 12 recently.
Yeah, and Sarah represents, we talked a lot, Jeff.
Her name's Sarah?
Yeah. Jeff and I talked a lot about whether Sarah was going to be, something significant in like the Northerner's future, because time travels in, always kind of think, well, is this going to be somebody who's going to grow up to be, say, the Northerner's great-great-grandmother, or because that's a time travel possibility. And Jeff made the point, and I think there's a note of dialogue to that point, is that no, she just needs to represent the world as it is then, and for the Northerner, the opportunity to grow up in a better one. And that's it. That's all that matters. So she's useful in also providing, I think, a balance between some of the emotional swings between the Northerner's point of view and Simon's point of view. Issue 13, there's a couple of terrific confrontational conversations with Simon and the Northerner that shed an awful lot of light on both of them. And I'm not going to spoil any of that, but this is really, having teased it, this is really an introduction to the beginning of the Northerner's story. And I think it's already, because Gary's already published the cover, picks up in Geiger issue 20. You'll see the Northerner again in issue 20. So the Northerner has a massive part to play in the overall Unnamed universe. The interesting thing about him and Simon, of course, is that Simon is living through it chronologically from the beginning of the independence of America to even into Geiger's time, whereas the Northerner is jumping backwards and forwards like a pinball through time. So he's experiencing the Unnamed universe out of order, but they're also experiencing a relationship with him out of order when he first meets Simon in issue 11, 12, and 13. He's known Simon for a very long time by that point, but Simon's never met him before. So it's the whole time traveler's wife of experiencing each other's lives slightly out of sequence. And actually, when Simon meets the Northerner next, it might be that the Northerner's never met him. So it's a different take on that relationship. So time travel's kind of a fun thing to play with.
This is the culmination of what the diehard, even Mad Ghost fans have been waiting for from the Unnamed for a really long time, Brian, because ever since I saw that portal at the end of Junkyard Joe number 6, and you see a Civil War garbed guy, and then after that we saw the hints, and then in Ghost Machine number 1 we saw his bio. Like, it's been wonderful that the pacing gave us Annie Oakley and Johnny Appleseed and Albert Einstein and the Bender experience prior to this, because I think you guys really built up to this. But this is just an absolute culmination of where we're like, oh my gosh, it's a crossover city. You know, like the things that those of us who truly love comics, it's like one of those things we knew was going to happen one day when we saw that timeline that you put in back in the back of those comics.
Oh, and plenty more to come. I mean, actually, we were just talking about, as much as Jeff and I do plot, at least in broad terms, quite far ahead, but the next year of worth of issues for Simon are quite big. We've got issue 13, obviously, but First Ghost Prelude in issue 14, which sets the groundwork for what Brad and Gene are doing in First Ghost, and then the 1909 storyline, which we've already hinted at, as you know, because it's something Albert and Simon discussed, and we're going to find out just why that had such an effect on their friendship. It's a big story, long story too, and then just swinging completely other way after that. I'm not going to tell you what that is, but if you like what you just said, you're going to really love those next few issues, because it's just bananas. And then after that one, it's even more bananas. So, you know, we're just looking into what we're doing in the 20s, and there's just an absolute hoot of a story, which will see the return of another old favorite character as well. So, yeah, so there's a lot of this where now we've done some of the groundwork. We can put layers on the groundwork and start building even bigger stories that work, especially those that have been with the book from the beginning or with the universe from the beginning. There'll be extra layers of that while we continue Simon's faltering development program.
They just keep on getting, I just need the next book to come out, you know, like, and you guys have created such a great story.
Thanks. I'm glad it's working for you.
One thing that we always that we discuss the covers, and we really love your wraparound A covers. They give us insight into the story, as well as like we see all the hints you put in there. Is that something that you think you're going to keep up with as the series goes on?
Yeah, I think so, because I like doing them. Yeah. And I tend to think wider rather than taller anyway in the way I compose images, but it's become a kind of signature for the book, and it wouldn't feel like the book if I didn't have the wraparounds on. So for me, I think it's just going to be if we do 150 issues, it's 150 wraparounds. So I always like doing wraparound covers, always loved doing them. I used to try and persuade editors to let me do them whenever humanly possible. But again, you always come up in Marvel and DC against needing to sell the advertising space, especially on the back of a cover. Again, it's not a problem here, and it's our book, and we can kind of do what we like. So I'm going to keep doing the covers.
No, we love it. We always like, it's funny because before you even open the book, we're like, well, what do you think that means? Well, look at that. Did you see that?
Yeah, I think I put a few hints on, it's issue 12's cover. There was a few hints coming up of stuff. And actually, the issue 11 and 12 also feature, Simon's sort of memory flashbacks to periods of that time. So you can see that in some, when he's having those mental breakdowns, there's also the burning the White House. And that references issue 14, which is the first Ghost prelude. So, but there's also a bunch of other little things in there which will come up in issues to come or already have been.
So let's talk about that. You mentioned the first Ghost prelude. That's going to be in Redcoat number 14. We did see a preview for that come out recently. That is still a wraparound cover by you. You did the back of that cover.
Yeah.
It features Sarah Nash is on there and Linus Nash, her son. Our understanding is Sarah's the president, Linus is the main character.
Yeah.
So, and that story, like you said, takes place in the world of the Unnamed. So
but it's in the present day.
The present day, okay.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about?
Well, I'm excited to read it properly because I love Brad's political and historical fiction. So, as a novelist, I've read a number of his books. I love Brad to bits. So I've wanted to read this story properly since Brad first came up with it. But all we've had really is Brad saying, giving us like pitches and outlines, but he's only really just got into the meat of making the comic now because Gene came on board to draw it. So I'd kind of done a pass at Sarah Nash for the Ghost Machine one shot last year, and in essence Gene wanted to keep that the same. I mean, there was never an expectation that might happen because obviously new artists coming in, it's a new story, and the understanding was that whoever did draw the book would kind of do their thing on it, which is fine. But Gene wanted to keep it the same as we established. But then I had to get like his reference for his characters, for Linus and a couple of the others that were in there. And there was some that he hadn't designed, I didn't use. But having, read the first issue script, I knew there were some kind of little key moments I could build that little montage on the back from without giving anything away. But I just wanted to make sure that absolutely connected to what Simon's going through, because whilst Simon's story isn't part of First Ghost, it does lay the groundwork for what becomes the First Ghost story, because, it's based around something that happened in the White House historically. And of course, Simon's got to be there because Simon's lived through the whole of history. So, in America. So it was a really nice way of being able to connect the books. When Brad first proposed the First Ghost story, I remember we were coming out of, our first Ghost Machine summit day one in, October 23. And Brad was talking about First Ghost, and we were just leaving the room. I said to Brad, given what you just said, Simon was probably there, wasn't he? And we were just like, so we knew we were going to do this, and we've just been timing this for whenever we knew we could get it out close enough and before First Ghost. Ideally, I suppose we'd have done it the month before, but because we have this other big storyline coming, we couldn't split. The best shot to do it was issue 14, though I think issue 17 might have been more ideal in terms of being like coming out next month, however. But it just, we couldn't split that next. We couldn't split the 1909 storyline up at all.
Just another quick one. You mentioned the visions that Simon has been having, especially in 11 and 12. We've seen these like furry, and if you can't tell us because it hasn't been revealed yet, then put stop me, it's fine. But we've seen these like furry, like creature looking things. And in that cover, not in the cover, I'm sorry, in the vision in Redcoat 12, it's Davy Crockett fighting them. And the only reason I know it's Davy Crockett is because you guys had one little panel of Davy Crockett at one point. Yep. So we know it's not Daniel Boone. It's Davy Crockett. Two coonskin cap wearing fellas.
Definitely Davy Crockett.
Yeah. So are they Wendigos? Are they Morlocks? Are they something you won't tell me? But this is something people regularly ask because they're on like 2 or 3 covers.
They're Sasquatch.
They're Sasquatches. Oh,
yeah. Evil bastards, those Sasquatch, I tell you. Nasty things, which is why Davy Crockett goes and hunts them. Because this is where we're going to kind of dive a little bit more into the magical side of some of Simon's adventures. So Davy Crockett, Monster Hunter, and he and Simon team up, and there may be a hint in that story of a character who will be new to the Unnamed, but will be coming at a slightly later point. But we might be dropping our first hint of another new Unnamed character in that story too.
Oh my gosh!
So so there's we've been talking about doing the Simon David Crockett Goes Sasquatch Hunting, and that's a really funny story. There's just also the way it ends and what's involved in it. So yeah, that's coming in the 20s as well, because we've got to do the 1909. We've got to do that other thing I told you about, which is 3 issues of Redcoat. Then there's the other story, which is Bananas, and then I think we'll finally get to the Davy Crockett story, which we're both looking forward to, because we've had that on the docket since literally day one. We just haven't found a chance to do it yet. But it'll delve much more into kind of the magical mystery monsterverse of the Unnamed side of things, because there's magic out there, as we know, but it comes stolen from Native American tribalism and mysticism. And with it, as I suggested in the issue 3's cover, come all the mythological monsters and madness and mayhem that come with all the Native American mythology as well, because that's part of America too. And although the conquest from Europe and England and later independent expansionism across the states has kind of submerged some of that stuff, it's still all there. So there are people like David Crockett who try to kind of stand on the line between the monsters and the people and keep things safe. And Simon's going to find himself embroiled in all of that stuff as well.
Davy Crockett Monster Hunter. 4 words that changed my life.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
That's awesome.
I like that you guys have had it planned since the beginning, probably since the book with Benny in it, when we find his, like, I feel like there were Sasquatches in that too.
Yeah, like a stuffed one or something.
Hey, we're not introducing these American legends for, any other reason than...
Yeah.
We're introducing the American legends because they're part of Simon and this larger world. Awesome. But whilst they all, they're not going to live forever like Simon, they're not going to be part of Geiger's world. There is a period where these, and I use American legends in capitals because it's kind of like a group name we've given them. But from John Chapman, Annie Oakley, there's a few others, David Crockett. These guys are kind of like the Justice League of their time,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's so cool. So speaking of official team names, at the end of Redcoat 12, the Northerner says, we have to stop the Cobbler before he reaches General Hood. If he does, the South will win the war, and none of the Unnamed will survive.
Yeah.
I think up until this point, the only character who's ever said the words the Unnamed was like the mail carriers in the future in Geiger, who were more like, yeah, there are unnamed heroes, like back in the day. So that's the first time we hear a character, like the Northerner is referring to a group of people called the Unnamed. Like, that makes me think superhero team. That's all I'm saying. Well, not superhero team, Ghost Machine character team. We don't have superheroes around here.
Couldn't say.
You know what? I love that.
Who knows?
Though.
Who's to say?
Because when that's in the book, we're like,
if we ever do like
genius,
a team up of sorts, like for all of these characters, and we haven't even finished introducing all the characters yet. But we absolutely will be taking the Marvel universe rather than the DC Cinematic Universe model of trying to rush things. We'll earn it over a decade. That's the plan. It will be earned. So that also that there'll be points at which you'll see why certain characters will and won't connect, because there's going to be connective tissue between them that's earned through their own personal emotional journeys. They won't just be together because they have to be together and the plot says they have to be together. So, it's a long way down the line. We will, if we could do it, we'll get to it when and the right to tell that story. And we just still really on chapter 1 right now. Well, maybe chapter 2, I suppose. So we're nowhere near the big finish yet.
The story pacing has been, if it keeps you wanting to come back for more, you can't give everything away by book 13.
No, I mean we
Exactly.
could have told Simon's overall story in probably 3 6-issue miniseries as kind of a 3-volume thing. It would have been very abbreviated and would have only focused on very key things. What it would have allowed us to have done was things like the John Chapman issue, the Annie Oakley issue, Bender's issue 7 with Albert dying, and so many of the other things that we've got coming up. And whilst they will enhance and grow Simon's overall story, they provide a lot of depth and color that doing it in those original kind of miniseries volumes we'd first conceived it as. I think it would have been to its detriment if we'd done it that way, because I think we're going to, while we do very much know the ending, we know exactly what the last issue will be, exactly how it's going to play out. We even know what the last 2 pages of that's going to be, but we want to earn that. And we're enjoying far more the chance of diving deeply into Simon's personality and letting, because you're saying this character is going to live for 250, 300 years because he's already alive in the Geiger's time. So he's going to be around a long time. If you tell that story quickly, it doesn't feel like the character's really that old and had that much experience. So let's live some of the experience with him. And that way, when we get to that final arc, we'll have really built up to it. So again, that for Simon will be utterly earned. It has to be earned, and it will answer so many questions, because even why he's talking in voiceovers, that's even part of that story. So we know a lot about Simon, but we really want to enjoy getting to know him better and getting to know him in much greater depth, so that when we do that final story, it's going to matter, at least to us anyway. It will matter as much as issue 7 did to us, and that's still a profoundly powerful issue for us.
And it's very uncommon nowadays. The 3 6-issue miniseries is much more common in the industry right now.
Yeah.
And
well, the thing is that there's an understandable reason for that, because the industry's changed an awful lot since we all read comics as kids. You get a big launch, you get a tail off, and then monthly books drop inevitably to a certain point. I mean, we're very lucky we're sticking at it, and actually our numbers are going up. So we had that as expected drop and go. But the way Marvel and DC handle it for their business model is to relaunch and reboot everything. And when we joke certainly that it won't take long before Redcoat and Geiger have been running longer than Spider-Man and Batman, because everything gets relaunched so often that the numbers change and so on. But we won't relaunch and we won't reboot at all. So it will support the books as, whatever numbers they have, because we're going to finish them. We're going to tell the story, and that's non-negotiable for us.
That's awesome.
So when you and Jeff decided that the $5 bill with Jefferson Davis's face on it instead of Abraham Lincoln would be like the Northerners' measure of success, were you intentionally thinking of like the Back to the Future picture?
Well, the first time I read that was in the script for the issue, and the description in the panel was, "This is his Mighty McFly photograph moment." So that was all Jeff, and that was entirely how he phrased it. So yeah, it's just a really fantastic shorthand way of being able to say the future is different now. It's not the way it should be again. It's the best way of solving a really, what would be a difficult problem visually to solve. So yes, that's going to be a continuing feature of the Northerners' journey through the Unnamed universe. In fact,
nice, we love it.
That made me excited to call that one out.
Well, we're all geeks at heart around here, aren't we? So, yeah.
Yeah. And what's neat about it is Sarah, who I believe she wasn't named in the issues we've read yet, but okay. Sarah she recognizes Jefferson Davis's face. She's like, "Oh, that's Jefferson Davis." And that gives the reader more insight as to like, she knows it's not money, but she knows who that is. And obviously, like, history would tell us why. You mentioned something earlier about her that I believe the line is, "She's the face of every child affected by this era," or something to that effect. We were ourselves, and many other our friends of ours who are in the different social media platforms have wondered who she was, because our first thought was Harriet Tubman, and then we looked it up, and then age doesn't work. So if you can't tell us, it's okay. But is she no one else? She's just a representative of the struggle.
Yeah. She's just a girl named Sarah.
Sarah is just, as we say, representative of the world that the Northerner came from, although at a different time. Wants to make sure that she gets a chance to live the life he didn't. So, in that purpose in the story, she represents that possibility for change for him and opportunity for giving people like Sarah and indeed, himself as a boy a better life, a freer life.
That's awesome.
And you'll get a little bit of a big hint about the Northerners' backstory in issue 12. But again, it's a story we're going to take time to tell, and it's going to spread across numerous titles and possibly even one of his own at some point. We'll see how that one develops.
That's a lot of people have asked that question, Brian, because he's an awesome character and everybody wants him to have his own title. But also, if you look closely at the Unnamed timeline, the Northerner does have his own logo, and it is trademarked. So one would assume there's a reason for
that. There's always a reason. We've got a reason for all the stuff we do. Sometimes we don't know what that is yet, but we'll do it. We think we're going to have a reason for it, right? Yeah, right. No, we do have. They're not. Because the way that character's story is going to unfold, at least initially, Jeff and I have talked about a few things. Next is in Geiger, but then we talked about something else, and it depends whether he and I can make the time to do it or not. So we will be carrying on his story, and if there may be an opportunity to do that in some sort of solo outing, but we don't know yet because we're still getting there, and we have other books that we have to do as well.
Yeah.
We got to get to the monster fighting.
That's going to come up too. Yeah, and as I say, there's some other characters that will be on that timeline.
Yeah,
enough as well. So it's getting crowded in there.
Yeah, that's what everybody's so excited about, though. So we do have this one question that we've started asking more on the creator interviews. It's a pretty cool one. So you can have your favorite beverage and kind of conversation with any Ghost Machine character. What do you drink? What do they drink? And what do you two talk about?
Probably Simon, actually. Apart from the fact that we're both Englishmen, I think because the way Jeff and I have talked about what we created Simon and how he's developed and how he represents part of us, I think it would be an interesting conversation, partly because I know a hell of a lot more about his life than he does. But also, I think I'd love to see whether I could get him to really embrace some of the stuff he's been through a little sooner than he's going to, because he would, if I was to help him that way, he would really not live through quite as much pain as he's about to. So that would be an interesting conversation. As far as what I drink is that depending on what year we were drinking, if we were assuming present day, then I have a fairly lengthy list of things I'd find acceptable. I think in those terms, I think Simon will probably find anything acceptable as long as I was paying for it.
As long as it was free for him,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll put it on the Ghost Machine business tab.
I believe I picked Simon as well.
Well, who else is there? Honestly, Geiger's not very chatty.
No.
Yeah, that's true. Nate the Nuclear Knight would drive you nuts.
I think I probably wouldn't mind.
I think that'd be endearing.
Yeah.
I think if I had to have somebody else in tow, I'd probably have Albert, young Albert. I'd find that.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I mean, the thing is that these fascinating historical figures, whether the fictional ones we're using or real ones, it's always interesting, especially ones for whom there's not an awful lot of actual, interview evidence. I mean, we live in a time when there's vast archival stuff going back quite a few decades now. So you can get a sense of some of these people, how they are, who they are, how they talk, and so on. There's not a lot of that with Einstein at all. There's a little, but then Einstein as a younger man, there's nothing. So it would be really fascinating to, I suppose, like any of the like George Washington too. I mean, it would be fascinating to learn what the man was really like, not what the legend was like, but the foibles, the humanity, the normal, the real everyday life of somebody who's become such a legendary mythological figure. Because people aren't legends and they're not mythological. They're people. They're ordinary. They may do extraordinary things and have extraordinary ideas, but ultimately, they're no different from you and me, really.
That's great.
No, awesome.
No, I was just thinking though, if you helped Simon and you like went back in time and you helped him, then you and Jeff would have to rewrite stuff because he might change his mind and he might do different stuff. And you have like a multiverse or something.
That's just given me an idea for something.
Yes, it has. There you go.
When I was a kid, I remember one of my favorite comic. I mean, I was really young, but Kurt Swan was drawing Superman at the time. Mm. There was this one backup story called The Day I Flew with Superman. It was Kurt Swan meeting Superman because, and so Kurt Swan is the artist of Superman getting to meet Superman because they come from different Earths. I was just thinking that just give me an idea for something.
No, that's super cool.
I'll make sure I dedicate it to you if we ever do that story.
Oh, don't worry about me. I just want to hit the story. I think I can see a panel. I can see a panel now with Simon Pure and Bryan Hitch sitting at a bar chatting. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
It's odd. One of the things we thought we'd never do with Simon was tell a present day story. We probably wouldn't get out of 1930s, we thought. Mm-hmm. And then he'd re-emerge in the time of Geiger, post-apocalypse. And there'd be reasons why you didn't see much of him in that time. But we keep coming up with stuff. And so it's all very well saying we're never going to do a present day story. But then when you come up with a really good present day story, you're going to want to tell the story. Mm-hmm. So it's, nothing's off the table, but that gave me an idea for one that it just, yes. And if it was a present day story and he did go in a bar, then I'm sure I'd be sitting there.
That'd be so awesome.
A bit of meta comic book paneling. But,
you guys have created, I feel like I could see Simon being there when JFK, in any of those situations, you could easily, if it made sense, he could be in those situations in the present.
Well, we said the nice thing about this book, and the one thing that it gives us is such an unlimited opportunity to tell any kind of story we want. Like, say with the David Crockett stuff, we've got the monsters and magic side of it. And if we really wanted to do a space-based story, there's also the 1960s, with Russia and America going at the space race. I mean, Simon will probably die unless they figured out some way of. Actually, we have got a way of Simon being able to get around. I'm not going to get into that though. But the idea of being able to leave America, but there's kind of a get out of jail free card on that one. We've figured out. But you could involve him in the space race. So you could get a For All Mankind kind of flavor story. Mm-hmm. So whichever period you want to pick, once you start saying, it's not just historical figures, it's mythological figures, it's legendary figures, it's possibly, figures that weren't necessarily historical fact, but historical fiction. You can start including those. But you can tell anything from, hardcore political stories if you wanted to, fun, goofy stories. Magic allows you to do kind of anything anyway. And really nothing's off the table. As long as each story allows us to in some way say something definitive about Simon or allow him to find out something about himself, then you can do anything. Absolutely anything. I mean, you could even do, if you wanted to, like an alien story, because you got Roswell in 1907. So, and all the start of the flying saucers mythology. So, you could make that a mythological aspect of, because it's the UFO thing is part of American mythology, but it's different mythology, but nonetheless it's in there. So you could borrow from any of this stuff to even tell those kinds of stories if you wanted. Invasion of the Body Snatchers type of thing as well, you could do. So, I mean, you could do anything.
That's so exciting. It's going to be a really exciting year.
I hope so. I mean, we're certainly excited about doing it. Yeah, and all the books, actually, there's so much good stuff happening. It's really exciting for us as creators to see what everybody else is doing and get excited about that. But at the end of the day, we've all got our heads down producing our own books. The only one, except Jeff, of course, is producing half of them himself anyway. But it's just a great time for us as creators doing this stuff. We're having a great time.
Speaking of having a great time, we always end where we talk a lot about comic books, but how are things with yourself personally? Have you been getting any time with the family outside of penciling the amazing pages that we've known to love?
Fortunately, I don't work stupid hours. I get up early these days because we got a new puppy. So I get up early with her, but I like to get started and get on with it and work till, a normal sort of time, late afternoon, and then that's it. And I don't work weekends unless I absolutely have to. And even then, it's only usually for a couple of hours of catch up while nothing else is going on. But all the other time is family time and friends time. So I live a pretty normal sort of working and daily life. So everything's kind of cool outside of that. As I said earlier, it's my wife and I's 20th wedding anniversary tomorrow. We're off to have a nice day and a half to ourselves. Yeah, family time's cool time. It's a big family. It's a busy family. It was my second eldest 27th birthday yesterday.
Ooh.
So it's all busy here. Something's always happening. And I work at home, so, it's usually happening literally right outside that door. And what we've called, it's like, the great illness and chaos of family life goes on all the time. And we've got 5 kids, so, I mean, they're not kids anymore because in fact, there's only one of them that isn't an adult now. Everybody else is 18 to 30, 18. We've got 15, 18, 22, 27 and 30-year-olds. So it's fairly dynamic around here.
Man, we think we're busy with one 9-year-old, and every time somebody like you talks to us, we just feel like we're crazy. It's
funny that when we got this puppy 8 weeks ago, because our older 2 dogs had died earlier in the year, very, very quickly after each other, actually, even though they were 2 years apart in age. And we like the first few weeks, we're going, but the other two, because same breeds, they're all retrievers. Were the other 2 this hard work? I'm thinking, well, we had the other 2 as puppies. We had really young children too, and how the hell do we do this? With several young children and 2 retriever puppies and working at home. It's like, how the hell did we pull that off? It seemed easier back then. I think we must have just forgotten. We're probably so tired that we've forgotten any of it actually happened.
Well, Mr. Hitch, it's been awesome to have you back on the show a second time. Mm-hmm. So much has happened with Ghost Machine in the last year, and it feels like we're just getting started, man.
Really are, actually. There's so much going on behind the scenes none of us can talk about as well, as the company continues to grow and develop. And it's, so we're super excited, and we really are just getting started on what was a 10-year plan. So that's a minimum, but the plan, we could plan for 10 years. So for us, we're just coming into year 2 now, and really just the engine is just revving up now.
Heck yeah, we are.
That's wildly exciting.
Well, I'm glad you're into it. I love the support you guys have given us. It's always, I always enjoy listening to the deep dives.
Thank you. It means the world to us that you do listen to them. And we'll hope to have you back on the show again, in another year, and to keep doing this journey together.
The annual Hitch in.
Yeah. Ooh,
yes.
Wow. You got to write that down so we don't forget that. That's pretty good. All right. Well, if you do want to check out all of our other content, you can do that by going to www.ghostmachinefans.com, where you'll see all of our different social platforms, as well as all the previous episodes of this podcast.
Thanks for joining us tonight on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast. Emphasis on the pod.
We'll take it all the way to there. I'm keeping that, man.